Good morning. You're with the Economic Times, and my name is Ashutosh Singhel. We're back with you for the series Accenture Presents the Economic Times CEO Breakfast. And today, it's the turn to talk about the banking and financial services industry. We're trying to look ahead to beyond the disruption caused by the pandemic. And we're talking about trying to imagine what digital native business models could look like. So today's conversation is about beyond the pandemic, building digital native business models. Well, I won't be too far off the mark if I were to say we are in unprecedented times. It may sound a little cliche, but some 18 months after the pandemic turned the world upside down, unprecedented is a word oft used, and I'd like to continue to use that. What has it done to traditional banks and financial institutions? They're faced with a situation which could be described as the known versus the unknown. That's one way to describe it. So let me say that again. The banks are faced with a situation that could be the known versus the unknown. First, the known part. The known part is one in which some tectonic changes are being caused because of technology, and it's been experienced for several years. The fintech companies are nibbling into the most profitable parts of the businesses of banks, and that's well known as well. It is now clear as daylight that the nature of banks of tomorrow will be very different from what it is today. That is also being debated as the ubiquitous smartphones and rapidly expanding role of technology drives consumers. Tech is making cross-border transactions, for example, easier than ever before, something that was the sole preserve of financial institutions. Several more changes could be added to that as well. Let's also speak about the unknowns for now. The big unknown for the financial institution is the way the regulators around the world could make a move on several key issues. So, understanding the flavor of regulatory changes could become critical, and that's something we'll try and talk about as well. The slow but steady spread of digital currencies around the world is adding an extra layer to the unknown. If there are no more unknowns to be added to this laundry list, if I may say so, getting the right people for the skills of tomorrow will certainly be a massive challenge in the coming years. That list could be longer than what I have mentioned. So, to discuss the issues around building the digital native business models, we're joined by a set of people who are some of the leading minds in the industry. They will help dissect the issues and challenges and will be able to spot the opportunity. That's very important in current times as well. So it is time to be with us for the next 90 minutes or so to listen to these leading minds. So let me welcome all the guests today. And the first is Zarin Daruwala, Cluster CEO, India and South Asia, Standard Chartered Bank. Amitabh Chaudhry, Managing Director and CEO at Axis Bank. Shekhar, Ghosh, Managing Director and CEO, Bandhan Bank. Tapan Singhel, Managing Director and CEO, Bajaj, Allianz General Insurance. Sonali Kulkarni, Managing Director and Client Group Lead for Financial Services for Accenture. And Piyush Singh, Senior Managing Director, Accenture in India. We also were supposed to speak to Renu Karnad, but she couldn't join because she had something urgent to attend to. But we did speak to her and we'll be playing out parts of that interview as we go along and discuss. So do have your cup of tea or coffee ready to listen to the experts as they dive into some of those issues. We'll try and cover as much as possible and would love taking your questions as well. So please keep them coming. So thank you so much, everyone, again, for me to join us. First, let me invite Piyush Singh, Senior Managing Director, Accenture in India, for a short welcome note. Good morning, Piyush. Thanks for joining in.
Yes, Ashutosh, very good morning to you as well. And thank you everybody for joining. Look, it's as you rightly said, Ashutosh, this is it's time when we are all starting to look beyond the pandemic as much as you can, acknowledging the large parts of the population that have been through social distress that will not be easy to look beyond. But to the extent that you can, then when you do so, you clearly are, you very well put, it's the world of knowns and the unknowns, right? I mean, among the knowns, what's obvious is that, everybody had underestimated how much of accumulation of disposable income had happened in the retail masses, and that they are willing to shift that towards asset buying. I think we'd all estimated that buying behavior is going to shift digitally, but I don't think we were sure that it was going to be irreversible. All our research says it is irreversible. Right. So, research that we've done, for example, for the automobile sector, shows that the digital buying in auto sector has gone well beyond research to now, almost, to the end of the buying process. So a very, big asset class that is very close to our industry in terms of, lending behavior has irreversibly shifted digital. What is, of course, the unknown in this mix is this big spike in asset buying behavior, both financial instrument asset buying as well as physical asset buying, is it a spike, or is that also a sustainable shift in people's buying bucket? That is the bit that is unknown, but there is definitely a surge in demand that we are all seeing. On the other hand, if you then start to look at supply, which is also quite related to our industry in one sense, is that there is clearly a challenge of supply. Supply chains are disrupted, the supply bottlenecks have emerged, which means, again, corporate sector will have to invest quite heavily in reinventing the supply chain models to adopt more digital capabilities in their supply chain as well as in manufacturing. Now, if you buy into that again would mean that I'm hopeful that there will be a surge in corporate, in a bit more of a demand in corporate sector for asset investment and therefore borrowing that we haven't seen in our market for the last 3 years. Of course, the unknown is that if the supply chain bottlenecks do put a spike in the inflation numbers, and to your point, if monetary regulators start to respond much more aggressively, that could change things quite drastically. Right? The third point I put forward is, of course, the wage pressures. Look, we are probably living in the hottest labor market that I have seen in the last decade or so. And this is global, but unprecedented in India. Right? What is also quite interesting is that this wage pressure as well as labor market heating is quite widespread. So there was that whole worry or doom and gloom about AI is about to kill the human job market. Right? I mean, clearly AI is working. Right? It is clearly adding to productivity of a corporation or of the economy, and is sucking in more labor to be able to serve. Now, that again, for us as an industry is good because, more structured and increased wages hopefully means more retail asset buying, more discretionary spend. What is unknown for me in India, and Mr. Ghosh, I'm sure will talk about it, is how much of that is being seen in the, unstructured labor market. And is that happening or not happening, or is it just restricted to the metropolitan, urban, and structured markets in India? The last part I would say is, as we move to this digital way of working, on one hand, all the surveys that we have been involved, on a very positive note, show that productivity hasn't dropped. But on the other hand, there is a bit of a concern that engagements have dropped and possibly per hour throughput is dropping as well, which means there will have to be a lot more of digital reinvention in ways of working that will have to be done in order for us to keep up engagement as well as keep up per hour throughput. So look, I mean, let me place those as the sort of, conundrums that we are grappling with as we discuss, and work with our clients in the market, and then open it up for some discussion.
Okay, thanks so much for putting the big picture and putting it in the larger scheme of things, what is happening. Let's start with the question. And my first question will be to both Bandhan Bank as well as Axis Bank, and I'll come to both of you. At what stage are traditional financial services companies in their journey towards adopting a digital native business model? Chandrasekhar, Ghosh, if you can go first.
Mr. Ghosh, you're on mute.
Okay. Thank you. If we see that there is three factors in here. One is of course, the finance, technology, and the consumer's business model. All these things, three things are moving digitally in a very good way. And so that without a digital banking service is not possible. If I see that go to my customer level, which are the 60% of that the retail and small business, if we like to meet them, I saw their shop, there is a standing one of the QR code and different name of the financial institution to pay. They are offering to the customer to pay their price with this transaction of that. Mm-hmm. So that means showing on that gradually it is going very large number on that. Other side, if I say that the Accenture is one report published on that, 60 crores of people here use a smartphone. 50% of the country people are transacted digitally in a week. Mm-hmm. Minimum one transaction they are doing. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, the banking industry without a digital is not possible from the bottom to top. But the second point on that, if we see that in the banking industry or in our level of the bank, which I started in 6 years before, and the last 5 years I have not seen that much. But in our bank, I saw that there is an 89% of the total transaction happened digitally. And this is a big number has come, but which was in earlier, it was not in 30% of the transaction. Mm-hmm. And I hope that the very soon will be like to go reach even 95% of the total transaction come as a digital. Small, medium, and big. But the point is there, how we can contribute more, educate more to the consumer business model to convert them more in a digital mode transaction that can be helped more in the future. The all not, but most transaction has come to the banking industry as a digital. But the other part on that, the digital point of view, senior citizen people till now, they are asking the doorstep service. They are not very much habituated to that, and they have lots of fear to use this digital. They called us, come to my house, give this amount on that. So that is the one side. But the next generation people who are sitting behind my borrowers, who are the women microcredit borrower, their children are more expert in this, the mobile banking app used, and they are also teachers to the mother and father, parents, how they can be transact. And sometimes they are very surprised. In yesterday, I received a call from one of my microcredit customers written me in Bengali language and say that I have the savings account this. I am putting my installment in this savings account. So regularly you deduct from my savings account. My mother will not go to the group meeting. Very changing on that. People are demanding on that other way. So banker also like to aspiration on that. I feel that very hopeful in the future digital banking in our bank, in the banking industry in India is needed on that.
Okay. So let's ask Amitabh Chaudhry, how is it panning out for you? Amitabh, as one of India's largest banks, what is the experience? And if you can give us a sense of what the journey has been like in the quest for a higher number for digital transactions.
So, Ashutosh, thank you so much for this opportunity. Sincerely appreciate it. And thank you, Accenture, too. I do believe, and building on what Mr. Ghosh said, banks have been early adopters in the digital space. In some cases, it is almost driven by necessity, and in some cases, obviously, deliberate choices are being made. We, I think, as industry, have or are moving or have moved from digital being an alternate channel to it being a core business. And now I think all of us, in some form or shape, are on a journey to build a digital native organization. Well, for banks in a digital world, it means that the design, the technology delivery, analytics needs to come at the core. And apart from that, we also need to build proprietary capabilities, because you can't just rely on people outside, people like Accenture only for becoming a digital native organization. You need to have your own capabilities, and which means that you need to double down your investments in digital and technology. See, there is a lot of noise, and rightly so, that India is digitizing, everyone is using a mobile phone, and all that is great. But most of it is around how payments in India have become simpler, or they have become low cost, or become zero cost. So a lot of innovation driven partly by the platforms which government and RBI has created has come on the payment side. But as Mr. Ghosh was trying to point out through some examples, the services which we deliver to our customers is much more than just payments alone. So when you think of digitization or creating a digitally native organization or addressing the digitally native customers, it is about bringing all your services, all your products to those customers. That means banks have to move towards modernizing their core systems. They have to scale up their cloud portfolio for supporting the real-time business models and building resilience across operations. For example, I mean, we have taken a cloud-first approach for our digital banking platform with close to 50 initiatives on cloud, which we believe is one of the highest in the financial services system. But in a way, you have to have a twin track approach. You have to take out the legacy IT stack, which has to be upgraded, re-platformed, or hollowed out to be made digitally ready. And at the same time, you have to build an in-house end-to-end digital stack where you can address customers differently through very different customer journeys, through instant gratification, instant underwriting, instant servicing, and so on and so forth. So, you have to come out with new products using that digital stack, which addresses the demands of the new customers today. You asked me where we are on that journey. I think all of us are on that journey. The question is twofold. One is how far we are on that journey, and every organization is at a different point, on that journey. And secondly, how will you execute from here to get to the end state? By the way, end state will never be achieved, but whatever you know today, for how well you execute on that will be a critical parameter to judge ultimately where you reach. So yes, there is a race which is on. Everyone is running. You're trying to change your tires also while you are running. And at the same time, you know that whatever goal you have envisioned is going to change in the months to come and the years to come. So interesting times and obviously very challenging times for financial institutions broadly.
Okay, so one more point of view would be from the insurance company point of view. And let's ask Tapan on that. Tapan, some of these companies in their business models, they have tried to work with and also kind of disrupt the industry in the way it is reaching out to customers. What has your experience been, and what does the industry face in terms of building a more digital native workforce?
Okay, thank you, Ashutosh. I think it's a great question. See, first and foremost, insurance and banking, there's a bit of a difference. There's one question I ask normally everybody: who amongst you has ever got up to buy insurance? No? And I've never got an answer. Somebody said, yes, I got up to buy insurance. I'm very excited to buy insurance. It has never happened. Yeah. So fundamentally, you may make it completely digitally native, but who's coming there to buy from you? Other than mandatory insurance or transactional ones, like let's automobile, is mandatory. Or when a COVID happens, health, starts picking up. So fundamentally, when we talk of digital, or we get excited about digital native, we should be very, very focused as leaders that what is it that we're trying to solve, and then build on that. And that is something, if we do that, then we're in the right direction. I'll give you one example. We are among the first in the world to shift our core to cloud now. Now, why did we do that? Our belief was the number of transactions is going to multiply many folds. And having a legacy system, servers on premise would not be able to handle those kind of spikes in volumes up and down. So the entire shift had to happen. And we took a bold decision of shifting the entire our core to cloud completely, and logging onto a good web service. Now, that is what we are doing because we believe there will be spikes in transactions at a very hyperspace. What we saw as Zhong'an happening, or the big $1 billion sale happening. E-commerce will become a very big distribution in times to come. And there you have the spikes coming through. So can a legacy system match that? The answer is no. So it's about planning for future, being ready for where it is, and ensuring that when these things are happening, you're not missing out because of your infrastructure limitation, which is there. That's the first point. Second point is, if I look at people now, and the word digital native is people know who've been with computers all their life, they're very comfortable with it. Forget about it. I think my father uses e-commerce much better than I do. And my younger daughter does it much better. So I'm sandwiched with the two, yeah? So if I have to get something, I have to refer to them. So now I see that people understand this very well. So how do we ensure that the conversation which requires for a good sale to happen in insurance, is facilitated highly by digital tools. So the issue with digital is how do you solve problems? And that's why when you see disruption happening in the digital world in insurance, you mostly find it front-facing, and you find it in the core. But the fundamental issue, which I believe is on the servicing part, and I heard Amitabh mention that, the servicing part is where the disruption has a huge potential to happen. Because for insurance, even though the insurance industry bleeds paying claims, which is a reality from data perspective, from a customer perspective, when you ask them, they say, these guys don't pay claims, which is very funny, in terms of data and in terms of experience. And fundamentally, it is the claim payment experience which is bad. How do you use digital? How do you use AI? How do you use the entire experience to become so frictionless? It's like walk in, walk out. But at the same time, you have all the checks and balances of frauds, with the analytics and all happening. So I think there are points that you figure out which you are trying to solve, and the tools are there, one, which are already there, so use them to solve it. But how do you plan as leader that, okay, in the next 2 years, these tools will reach here, and you start building a solution. By the time the tools reach to the place, where you want them to be, the solution is ready. I think time has not come that when tools are there, you start finding solutions. Futuristic is when you're trying to find solutions and solving problems, and you're expecting the tools to reach where it has to be. And at that crux, you're the first to hit the market and transform the industry. And that is what startups actually do. They're ahead of time because they actually use the latest tools. But legacy companies are still trying to figure out how to go there. So how do you do that? I think to my mind, it is different pieces. How do you put it together to get an answer to your question you asked?
Okay. Piyush, I'll just come to you. Let me take the input from Zarin as well. Zarin, while some of these points also apply to Standard Chartered in India and a multinational bank in India, just want to understand how are banks working in the new normal and a foreign bank, as we traditionally call it. Is the digital and remote way of working, how does that help a brand like yours or any other large global bank to thrive?
So I think, Ashutosh, we have global platforms which are common for most countries. So, and we operate in markets right from very, very advanced markets like Hong Kong, Singapore, which are way ahead of maybe where India is also. So for example, our bank has launched a pure digital bank last year called Mox Bank, extremely successful in Hong Kong. And now we are looking at pure digital bank in Singapore. So we do have examples of other countries where we've completely gone ahead of the curve. I think when we talk of digitization, I think there are many elements of that. One is business design, experience design, what kind of customer experience you're giving, how are you doing data first, what is your architecture, and finally, how are you changing the organization ability, retraining, reskilling people, etc. So I think all banks are in this journey. I would say some banks little ahead, some banks catching up, but it's all banks are definitely moving in that direction. Our own bank, in terms of customers, the digital adoption, we are 10% ahead of Indian banks, average Indian banks. So we are quite ahead in terms of our customer adoption. Of course, that's also sort of customer profile that we have is a little different maybe from some of the public sector banks. In terms of digital servicing, again, almost 100% digital servicing now that we have. Tapan talked of moving the core banking to cloud. That is something that is underway. Now will be done by the end of this calendar year in terms of moving our core banking system to the cloud. And in terms of API, again, India, Standard Chartered India is way ahead in the Standard Chartered Global Network in terms of the kind of APIs that we offer our customers and a lot of customization that we are offering. So I think every bank has their own journey, and we are no less, I would say, in our journey. So.
Surely. Okay, so Piyush, you wanted to make a point if you could.
A few points that came up as I was listening to everybody. One is that, look, I mean, there's no doubt that when you today's benchmark, whether it is rural, deep rural, suburban, or urban, is set by digitally native organizations. Now, in terms of they being Amazon, they being likely being Google, or the social, network. One of the big survey results or feedbacks when you start to benchmark digitally native and non-native is failure rates. See, they are setting the benchmark of non-failure. Google goes down for 4 minutes. It's headline news globally. Right? I mean, Amazon goes down. It sends Twitter on fire. Now, therefore, where the non-digitally native industry has to come up is to those rates, because that's where we are being judged. Now, that will not just require technology transformation, it also requires business model transformation, because at the end of the day, technology is enabling. And one thing we'll have to be careful about is we don't end up transferring the analog business model onto a digital technology infrastructure, because the technology will then fail the business model. The other point I would make is to Mr. Ghosh's point, surprisingly, if you look at, whilst there is nervousness in some parts of the demographics, and as Tapan was saying, on the other hand, there is adoption in the same demographic of digital much greater than in what we may have perceived at times, right? The fraud and other risks are higher today in socially engineering misuse of the old model. So if you look at debit card fraud risk is much greater than digital transaction fraud risk. So I do think that some of that education will have to be done, because not so much as the customer, our institutions are more fearful that heavy digitization may increase fraud risk for our customers. Customers are not that concerned, and the customers are facing greater fraud risk from more non-digital means rather than digital means. Right? So I think those are a couple of points I just wanted to put forward. Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Sorry, Ashok, if I can just add to that, I think as I was hearing, everyone speak, and especially around digital native models, I think the obvious sort of conclusion is obviously everybody on the digital side, it is, transactions are getting increasingly, moving to that, right? So we heard Renu also in her pre-recorded sort of thing talk about 88% of their onboarding is happening now, or customers are coming in through digital, as well as Mr. Ghosh speak about, right? But I think to be a truly digital native organization and a business model is how are we changing that experience even when it's a face-to-face interaction. So even if a customer is walking into a branch, or even if we are providing doorstep banking services, right? Where it's an assisted sale, or like payments is the most obvious one, but for other products and services which are still high on engagement and people-to-people engagement, how can those engagements and interactions also move digitally, so that from a customer experience perspective, whether the customer is engaging with a AI bot, or with a call center agent, or with a branch agent, the experience is seamless, and that's really the sort of true test of a digital native from a business model perspective, I would say.
Okay, so we've spoken about some of the challenges. Now, since Sonali, you referred to Renu Sood Karnad's point, let's now hear from her on what changes it has brought about for HDFC. Let's hear Renu Sood Karnad.
So for the last 18 months, I think the scenario has changed so much as far as buying of homes is concerned. I think there was a period, and I used to always worry about it, where you have, as I call it, the Uber generation. The Uber generation started questioning, should I buy a home right now or not? If I can rent something out, does it make sense for me to do that rather than put in, the capital, take a loan? I think that has changed. I have seen a lot of youngsters now understanding why it makes a lot of sense to have that.
So that's the point, that the Uber generation, as Renu Sood Karnad mentioned. Let's then expand on that and talk about maybe omnichannel, because that is a key word that you hear with all financial services companies. So, Tapan, if you can give a sense of how can insurance companies relook at their own culture, maybe, just like banks would need to do that, and rebuild one which allows for being more digitally dexterous and making it more agile. How would you expect that to happen?
Okay, so the good part is, Ashutosh, like when I started working way back, about 30 years back, then all the changes had to happen internally. The external stimulus was very less. So you could have the luxury of being happy with whatever you're doing and talk about it. Today, actually, the external stimulus is so high that it is not about what you have to do as a company. I think you have no option. Things are moving at such rapid pace. So let's talk about legacy companies now, though Allianz now is 20 years old and we're still a startup. But if I talk about, when 20 years back when we started, we did all the latest things. Over time, you get so comfortable with what you have done that you overlook what's happening outside in the market. But in today's time, this hyper speed of changes happening, you can't overlook that. Mm-hmm. So if I look at the front end experiences for the customer, I think a lot of newer companies did a great job on that. And some of us not so new were actually missing out on that. But then the speed of change is so fast that you don't have an option. So then you move forward, and because your experience of your own core business, you're able to do a better job there. And then you feel happy about it. In the next 3 months, you see somebody else moving up. So I think today's change, you understand, is not only driven internally. One, there's a lot of huge pressure externally also to keep on transforming. And I heard Zarin mention that it is about some distances up and down now. It's not about huge differences in companies. So I think somebody has a huge difference, then either they're doing something very great or they're off the market completely. So the pace of change is happening because of external stimuli at a very hyper speed. That's the first thing that we understand. Second is our own people. The problem with change is not about the stimuli and the belief. It is the problem that if I allow things to get so transparent and so straight through, what happens to my 30 years of expertise and experience and my position? I think that is the roadblock, which is to be solved. And we heard when Piyush mentioned that with AI, ML coming in also, the number of jobs exploded, the market exploded. I think the time is that how do you look at your job differently? So to get a culture of change, it is more about working on the fact that with these changes, how do experts move to the next level of creating something? The excitement of being expert and creating something new using digital tool for something which has not been solved as yet, which enhances customer experiences or the industry to a different level. When you get that culture on, then these things become pretty easy. The change is inevitable. You today can't just sit back and just feel happy with what you're doing. You'll be pushed externally, you'll push internally, and it is a hyper speed. You miss out 1 year and you're behind, you're gone. I think that is the level at which we are today, Piyush. So, Ashutosh.
Yeah, so very interesting. So there are some questions also coming in. So we'd like to take some of those questions as well as we go along. So this one goes for Bandhan Bank, I guess, because Nikhil Bhardwaj is writing, digital is the default mode ahead. Banks and insurers have been at the forefront. How can we make it absolute default for all categories of customers? And he says, both urban and rural. Mr. Ghosh, your point?
Okay, no, I'll be like to first come with align with Mr. Tapan Singhania. Give the example on that. I have that the more than 1 crore microcredit borrower. And we are providing the insurance services, in the life insurance services, in their spouse also together. That means that more than 2 crores of the people are insured. The earlier, I have a come on that, that is in 5,000 to 6,000 claim settlement has come manually, the big number of pages, and the sending to the insurance company. I recall on that one of the biggest insurance company, I sent them, and with a big basket, we say the suitcase given to them, and they say that no, I cannot receive it. They are removed the suitcase to me, and I feel that how I can provide these services to my customer. The claim settlement has need the bunch of papers on that. Now, this bunch of papers is not needed to send to the insurance company. Everything automatically uploaded to their app, in the mobile app, and customer done it. And they are very easily getting their claim within 15 days or 7 days. So that helped that the insurance, the services to the rural and urban, both the areas who are poor or low income or bottom of the pyramid or rich people, they are getting the same service on that. So that has been helped with this digital service to the rural and urban, and the same on that. But if I come to the banking services in the rural and urban, that till now, it is a gap. Because understanding of the urban and metro people about the digital banking and financial services far ahead from the rural people. So rural people, actually they are got the education from bank like us, because we are educating them in a group meeting, individually, how they can be converted as a digital on that. And recently have been set up a 2 branches as a pilot. Why not in the 100% of my customer use the digital? I hope that I'll be success in these 2 branches, and then it will be like to scale to the across the country. But the challenge on that to education level, there is a support has come from the children, next generation people. And the third point is a rural connectivity is not enough till now. Is a very disturbing on that. So transactions started and stopped the connectivity, and they are failed to transact, and fear have been increased to this customer. For that is one of our struggle for digital mode of the rural. So I hope that in the future it will be like to focus more in the rural, how connectivity can be improved. That can be like to more education, more in the rural people and this type of people. And we are started on that. Why not customer paying the amount of purchase from the wholesale market by mobile? And why not he is asking to the customer, you can pay with this the tab. So that is been started on that. I'm very much hopeful that they are culturally, they are changing themselves also to use on that. And very surprised, I have this week, and 4 hours journey from Calcutta, there's an towards areas and very interior. I saw from my car, one of the Amazon delivery person are delivered some of the packet. I'm surprised on that. How they are now entering to that rural. So very open on that.
Okay.
So this is not restricted only urban and metro. So this is the point on that. Every of the bankers, we have need to develop their skill. That is a very big issue on that. The employee skill, how they can educate to the customer, how they can be handholding, give the support to the customer to use it and more on that. This is my learning on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that input. Zarin, in terms of the kind of adoption that you're talking about, you talked about 100% digital. Okay, looks like Tapan, you had a point to make. Before I go to Zarin, I'm sorry, Tapan, if you can just make a brief point, please.
Yeah, no, I think when Mr. Chandrasekhar was speaking, I was reminded that we were thinking of, we do a lot of crop insurance, so we cover like millions of farmers. So we thought, how do we get the claim straight on? And we thought, do we develop an app? So a lot of people said, farmers and apps like Tapan, do you think it will work? And we were so surprised. No, our Farm Mitra app has more downloads, more usage than our urban app has. No, so I was just trying to take the point what Mr. Ghosh said. No, it was unbelievable. Like now we have all the farmers lodging the crop claims and everything, and straight through claims happening, processing happening. It was unbelievable for me also. But we just went ahead with the belief that no, why not? And that why not turned out to be such a huge success. Like it transformed the entire process completely. So I think that's
okay. So what are the learnings, Zarin, from the 100% digital way of working, something that can be replicated across more banks and perhaps all banks? If you can explain that, please.
I think one is the tools that you offer to the customer, but sometimes you find that a customer may be happy doing payments digitally, but may want, wealth, for example, they may want an assisted model. So sometimes it's the customer choice. Partly they'll be digital, partly they'll want some relationship manager. So I think the big learning is, how do you look at the customer lifecycle management? And how do you give a lot of data to your frontline so that when they do the customer engagement, in case a customer wants a particular virtual kind of wealth engagement, how do you equip your frontline? That is one. The second important thing is reskilling. And how do you get the mindset of a digital DNA in the organization? To my mind, that is a very, very important element of the whole digital journey, because it's how quickly your employees are embracing. Some job families become redundant when you do certain digital things. How do you reskill them? How do you redeploy them? How do you constantly train them? So, for example, in last 18 months, we've used this time to sort of do a lot of digital training. And we, in fact, got 25, 30-year-olds to come and talk. And in fact, I myself attended a few of the sessions. And it's all about, certain concepts, certain understanding, certain practical things, certain capabilities, which a lot of the frontline don't know. They only know their element of, the digital capabilities. So it's all about constantly unlearning and relearning. That is, to my mind, very, very important. How do you make the digital DNA in the organization really all pervasive? That's
okay. So I'd like Piyush's input on that. But before that,
Amitabh wanted to say something. Let's go on.
Yeah, I just, I can't stop myself, but my apologies. But, I do have a bit of a different perspective here. We are all talking about digitization and we are giving examples of where digitization is helping. But, these are all incremental at the edge. If you were to step back from all this and ask ourselves the question, can we create 100% digital experience for every customer in India? The amount of work that is required, we are totally underestimating it. I mean, if I have to give a digital experience to someone sitting in a village, I need to firstly have all my platforms completely redesigned so that I can get all the information I want. Then I need to redesign my platform so that I can deliver that information through either through direct means or through my salesperson or through a business correspondent. That information which I deliver has to be relevant at that point in time. It has to be updated. So, when we talk about digitally native customers or digital bank or whatever words we've been using, yes, I am hearing examples of incremental stuff. All of us are doing it. It's not that, some Axis Bank is unique. But the magnitude of what needs to be done to get to that ability that if you are standing in front of Ashutosh, can you give whatever Ashutosh wants at that point in time? And actually, in some cases, proactively get even before Ashutosh asks for it. It is a completely different proposition and the size of the problem is completely different. So I don't want that to be underestimated because we're doing some incremental things. So, to get there for all the organizations is a 5 to 8 year project. It's not 6 months, 12 months. And I'm sure Accenture wants organizations to talk more of that rather than incremental changes, because that's where they'll make the real money. Not
okay.
So
Piyush, let me
Amitabh is a very threatening person for Accenture. He's in one half an hour, he has he's given away our business model. He's challenged it at the same time and put our entire pricing strategy at risk.
We love you, Piyush. That's why. So my concern is that, when we talk about some of these things, you have to change the platforms, you have to make it cloud ready. You have to, the ability to provide information for it to move it to the right people at the right time, which is relevant, means almost everything in the bank has to be changed, literally. And that requires a completely different mindset thinking process. And I completely agree with Mr. Ghosh and Zarin. People have to be reskilled. Why people? All the people, including your vendors, have to be reskilled, because it's not that all our vendors understand this new world. They're also learning as we're going along.
Okay, since you mentioned about reskilling, can I just add a little point to that, Amitabh, and if you can respond to that as well. While you're talking about the vendors, while you're talking about the frontline salespeople and everyone, what about the top management? How has their reskilling been different? Are we seeing that in the industry at all? And then I'll ask Piyush.
No, Zarin made a very relevant point. I mean, in case of Access, at least I have something to share, so I can. We are going through something called a technology masterclass, and we've been doing that for the last 13 weeks. Our board is also joining, and what we're really doing is picking up very specific topics to make people firstly understand what all these words are all about. And we're obviously having industry experts come and talk about it. Now, the last part of the classes are all around, I'm making everyone actually do coding, simple coding, but get an idea of how do you code a simple application or a bot on a website. And we're all learning and kind of going through those classes together. And now you can do that with people sitting, different places. We're not stopping there. Now we are going to the next stage where we are calling world experts who have done innovative stuff in terms of how did they do that? And what is the difference it brought about, in the business models of various companies? Because you're asking a very relevant question. If we don't understand what is involved in doing things of this nature, we will not be able to relate to the demands being made by our IT or digital banking experts who will come and say, we need to do this. This is the money we need to spend, but we have no idea what they're talking about. We have some rough guess on what the output should look like, but otherwise we don't know what goes in there. So we are doing that. We are obviously sending a lot of our people for various programs over and above this, thinking about design thinking, looking at how you can actually, use some of the latest tools which are available and attend those classes with some of the other parts of the participants coming from all over the world and get a different perspective. So we are doing a lot of that too. But these are early stages. I believe that this journey has to continue for the next couple of years to really make a difference, even at the top management level.
Okay.
But we are on the journey.
Yeah. So before I come to you, Piyush, Mr. Ghosh has a point to make. Mr. Ghosh, you're on mute. If you can unmute yourself and make your point, please.
Just to one point I've been add with Amitabh. Is it correct from that? This is not possible to fully digitize or to fulfill the need of the consumers and that. But the point is there, what learning we are seeing that the unexpected, the speed has come to the digital transaction movement. So that will be like to prepare ourselves as a banker, and also will be build up the system which can be like to absorb that speed. But as coming the future is needed on that to focus on that areas. That is my point.
Okay. Piyush, so the big picture in terms of the pillars that financial institutions need, and I'm saying the broader term, to ensure that they get their digital strategy, digital native strategy right, what should that be?
Look, I think I echo wholeheartedly what Amitabh said. Right? It's a brilliant time to be heading a bank. It's quite difficult, an impossible time to be heading a bank, right? Because the paradoxes are quite challenging. See, on one hand, you want to transform your existing business and your existing, if I can call it, legacy. On the other hand, you are aware that this incremental change is going to be so long, and whether the world will give you that much of time and leeway is an unknown, right? So do you then disrupt it entirely by moving and creating a fully digital native parallel, and then shift and load your existing book of business to that is the question. The other point is, don't forget that there is also the disruption that the valuations that some monoline businesses are getting, right, is sometimes bigger than a full bouquet of customers, bouquet of customer needs, services that, ideally you want to offer as a bank, right? So then you come to the question, do I want to be a fully customer-centric 360-degree service provider, a financial services provider, or do I break myself into monolines and bring highest amount of valuation return for my investors? So I think that the paradoxes are quite big. I mean, but the heart of the pillar of this change is, going back and saying, well, we are now going to have, can we shift to a digitally native business model, right? When you do that, then you start to build everything behind that, right? Because otherwise it's very difficult to, and I wasn't aware of the level that Amitabh's already doing for his board and his management team. That is super, super critical, because, so many times I've been to, top table discussions where on one hand, leaders are willing to say, we are now a tech company. On the other hand, they're saying, oh, by the way, I don't get this. So hopefully somebody does, right? So kind of, hold on a minute. How does this work? You want to be a tech company or willing to disown the understanding of how that will drive change is at the same time. So I think that level of adoption and start so that people come to the table with a view of how they want to use tech to drive transformation is going to be critical as well. So look, digital native is not technology, digital native is business model. Technology is enabler. Technology can enable, thankfully is becoming quite ubiquitous and can enable many, many things. And the other thing is, I said is, and then when you go into, can you create that technology that is resilient? We have got such a diverse set of, demographic as well as geographic reach to serve, that we need to create a far more resilient than many countries or geographies in the world infrastructure that can then serve. Otherwise, we start to fail, and then the digital native business model breaks down. Because the moment you have to create a second business model to serve a lot of part of the economy, then where is the digital native in it?
Okay, I'd like to come to Sonali, but Sonali, we'll try and understand from you what you hear from companies you speak to. But let's first hear from Renu Karnad, because when I spoke to her a little earlier, so I asked her about what should be the approach in building and driving the digital channels. And let's listen to what she had to tell.
Digital approach is always very, very customer centric. What is the UX? What is the experience that the customer is going to have? How easily can he understand what you're asking him for? How easily can he retrieve the information that you're asking for by making sure those tools are available, in the whole process, in the whole journey? And I think that is so important. And that is what, it's not just us, very honestly, all the financial institutions are trying to see how to make that journey easier. Like, for example, pulling a tax return, right? Getting your bank statement easily available. Of course, things are going to completely change, Ashutosh, once the account aggregators, you've been talking about the account aggregators where the government is going to be giving licenses, is already given to few. I think all that is going to be so easily available that both for the entity which is funding and for the customer, the experience is going to be far more, smoother.
Okay, that was Renu Karnad talking about the approach for digital. Sonali, when you have your finger, you do have the finger in the pulse of some of the companies. What do they tell you about their approach and about what all they are trying to do?
No, I think it's anyways completely in line with what we heard, what we are discussing today. And I think one thing which does stand out is digital is everywhere, right? I think, I don't think there is any standalone business transformation which is happening. So it is quite all pervasive, whether, and we heard Mr. Ghosh also speak earlier, whether it is across different customer segments or different geography as well, even within urban or even between urban and rural. So I think digital is all pervasive, and it's there is no standalone transformation in that sense without digital. But I think what people are now trying to do or go beyond the obvious. A few years back, the focus was, okay, can we get some of the basic transactions on digital? Can we get the servicing capabilities on digital? And I think, as Amitabh rightly said, I think we now need to go beyond that and see it's not just what is the experience that you give at the front, but how do you fundamentally re-architect the bank or re-architect your financial services. And Tapan also said that now they have put the core also on cloud, right? And how do you re-architect therefore the entire bank in that sense, to make sure that you are actually able to sustain on this digital change as well? Because the paradigms are changing very, very rapidly, and I think last 18 months we've seen that. For example, payments was always very high on digital, right? But we have seen that now across all the other segments or all the other products and services as well.
Okay. So some of those fundamentals need to change, and re-architected is the word that Sonali mentioned. So let's ask Bandhan Bank, Shekhar Ghosh. The bank started with.
Ashutosh, can I just make one quick point, which is that, see, one of the changing paradigms, changing mindsets, which everybody's mentioned data all the time, right? And this is obviously very important. The important thing also is, see, in a world that we are, where consumer preferences have changed at a pace which is unprecedented, we will have to make sure that we move away from instinctive decision making. See, customers are willing to give you enough data, digital footprint to tell you what they plan to do and how they are preferring it. Because what you heard today, just in the last 1 hour, is there is no single answer for any demographic, right? I mean, the people who are this demographic, younger demographic, who are either fully clued in or fully checked out, as well as higher, rural. Same happening, farmers, willing to buy into this. There's some who are not. So I do think that we will have to ensure that we are basing our decisions, and our offerings on the basis of what we are hearing on hard, core data and analytics, rather than instinct. Because as because I said, I mean, the trends are we are still discovering how far things have changed in the last 18 months.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I wanted to, interesting point made. Data is giving you the leads, I would say, in terms of where you could go. Chandrasekhar Ghosh, in terms of the way the bank has shaped up, you started as an MFI and now as a full-fledged bank. How are you seeing the difference? What does it mean in terms of the way technology is advancing? What changes does it make or get the bank to do?
Thank you. Very good point on that. Our learning, I recalled on that if digital was not possible, that maybe I cannot provide the deposit service to my microcredit customer. Because their signature, if it is done today, and after a month, the signature have been forget, and no matching of the next signature.
Correct.
So now digital have been helped, technology helped on that. The tab-based banking, they're using the biometric to identify automatically transaction happen on that. So that is the solution has come now to very easily, I am providing the deposit service to my microcredit customer. They can withdraw their deposit and deposit their money by the tab. And it is a very big change has come and very comfort has come from the bank level on that. This is the one side in the beginning. Next point on that, I already mentioned about the insurance part, but if I come on that, the bank is now newly developed as a Vision 2025, the focusing on that, the upgrade, the infrastructure, IT infrastructure, applications, CVS, and everything together, and which have been like to align with the digital banking and also provide the best service to the people. Why we are doing on that? If I say that the earlier we are more focused on that the high touch model, but high tech also needed. We understand about it, and if so, the every quarter, the last month, my system is not permitted that much of the transaction acceptability. Sometimes we are faced the challenges. Now we are decided to change this, all this infrastructure, CPS, application, all things. So that we are very comfortably provide this, the growth of the bank and number of customers are growing in a 3 million in a year. We can be provide very comfortably service to them. And next, another point we are introducing on that, data analytics center, which is the excellence center we are establishing in the bank to analyze the data, because we have the huge data, the 2.5 crores data in the bank, though it is a new bank for 6 years, but no analyze this data and providing their need-based some financial support to the customer. So it will be the future is a very big opportunities for business growth in the bank to analyze this data, which is called the big data analysis. And we are setting up on that, and all of these things are preparing very fast on that in this time, and which can be helped to the bank in the future. The more service we can be provided to our customer and who have the need in a basic need, and also the some of the future need also we can be attracted by this the way. So that the investment in the IT for future is needed to the bank now and forecast for the future. And Bank Bandhan is doing on that way.
Okay.
But point is, Mr. Sena, I've been little bit the conservative other way. If I say that the demand time, the lots of people has come to this the digital transaction. Mm-hmm. There is a one tea stall in front of my office, which is very informal tea stall. I saw that the one of the name that is in everything the art is taking on that. Mm-hmm. After 1 year, he is not taken. I asked, why you are not taken? He said to me, sir, it has been taken, but after the 20,000, I have need to that money transfer to the bank. If I not transfer bank, I am not able to transact, and then my tax will increase. So I have been stopped that one. I do not know after the Corona issue, what will be happen for digital? Is it coming down again? I do not know, but I have some concern on this.
Okay. Brief point before I go to Amitabh.
I think Amitabh made the point earlier, which is also quite critical, that it's not enough for the institutions that we all represent to change their business model and digitize. It's such an integrated ecosystem. And after Amitabh, I definitely think we should ask Tapan, because he is one of the point he made, his biggest moment of truth is claim. He cannot deliver that claim unless until his entire ecosystem is digitized with him, right? Whether it is hospitals or it is the garages or whatever. So I think the challenge also is, it's not, we could actually make the customer experience much worse if we go fully digitally native and our ecosystem goes full in the opposite direction, because that breakdown is much worse than having a analog model. So that's another conundrum. So I'm not asking that we have to grapple with.
Okay, Amitabh, in terms of learnings from the more nimble fintechs, what have been, as you watch them, if I may say so, from the sidelines, and there are quite a few coming up, what have been some of the learnings and some things that you may have imbibed as well, or tried to do that as well? You're on mute, Amitabh.
Apologies. First thing which when you meet the fintechs, and one has been doing that for a long period of time, is that they will on your face tell you that they will eat you for lunch one day. That confidence which they have in terms of what they're trying to do and how they're going to disrupt you and how you don't get it is very evident, which I guess also motivates you to say, oh God, we better do something. So it's very important to meet fintechs, because they'll basically first tell you that they will eat you for lunch. Second, I think they are not in any way, beholden to anything which is legacy. They are recreating everything. And in their minds, a lot of people have said that customer is at the center. But I think, because they're young, they themselves are customers, they really do a great job of putting the customer at the center. Because of our legacy issues, sometimes we say it, but we're not able to do it to the extent we would like. But the fintechs are able to do that. And because they're able to do that, their customer journeys and what experience they give to the customer invariably tends to stand out in comparison to you. Third, obviously, they're using all the latest technologies. And so, in terms from a tech platform they're creating is very different. Fourth, speed, agility. They make mistakes also in the process. It's not that everything is not done. They launch it, keep correcting it as they go along. But speed, agility is something, again, which is very, very different. And in everything which they're doing, when I'm giving you some examples, there is a lot to learn from us. So how do we react to all this that is happening? So in case of Axis Bank, we a couple of years back went and set up a digital bank which was separate. We gave them a startup-like environment. We said, think like them that way, attract people of that nature. And can we somehow try to ensure that we can get the same benefits that what a startup gets? But you always have compliance people and risk people and cybersecurity people who are sitting there and saying, no, you can't do that. It is a problem. You're not thinking through all the risks which you're creating for the bank. In case of startup, all that is, it is important. It's not that they don't pay attention to it, but there is no risk compliance guy sitting there every day and telling them that you can do this, you cannot do this. And you had mentioned regulator in your opening remarks. So please understand and appreciate that some of the institutions like who are represented here have regulators, and regulators are concerned about what we are doing in the digital world, because while it's all great to talk about digital journeys and customer experiences, we are creating operational risks which a lot of us might not understand, or we will come to know as and when they blow up. So in that sense, the regulators are worried, and regulators have huge number of regulations also which need to be complied with. So lot to learn from the startups. And we obviously are in an environment where kind of, let's call ourselves legacy for a minute. We need to get the best of what startups are doing, and at the same time, think of the risks, keep the regulator happy, keep regulators satisfied that we understand what they have in their mind. And it's a balancing act. You need to balance all the stakeholders here to ensure that you can also continue to move forward. And one way to do it, apart from all the other things I've said, is that you need to embrace the startups, work with them. I mean, they are competition, of course, but we believe that it's an open architecture model, and we need to work with those startups and provide them the pipe if necessary, or work with them in a strategic partnership to allow them to do things which they can do better, and in some cases ask them to do things with us which they can never do. So kind of partnerships becomes very important.
Okay, so so I'd like to take inputs on that point, from Zarin as well as Tapan. Zarin, an established brand like Standard Chartered across geographies, as you mentioned, and then partnering with these nimble 20-somethings, sometimes 30-somethings. How does that happen? How does that osmosis happen? Or can it happen?
No, it is happening, and very much needed also. My personal view is, as a bank, you can't do it all. And you can't keep investing forever in certain niche areas. You might as well be focused on the bigger, broader architecture. So I think thanks to API banking, etc., one is able to sort of partner with fintechs, and all of us are doing that. For example, in India, we've partnered with a few of the fintechs to give a comprehensive custom-made solution to our clients, and it really helps to sort of leverage one another. Standard Chartered Bank globally has actually tied up with tomrrow in US to use their model intelligence platform to improve model quality, increase trust by analyzing models. We've the first financial institution to use TradeLens, a blockchain-enabled digital container logistics platform to modernize global supply chain. So globally also we are partnering, and to me that is the way forward, because even fintechs would love to leverage large platforms because they get access to certain customers, and they get to sort of step up in terms of their customer base. And for banks, you get a certain set of capabilities which you cannot be sitting and investing every single capability that every single customer needs, So it helps to leverage one another.
Okay, Tapan, for the insurance sector, the learnings from the more nimble, and we've seen a great growth for some of those platforms in the insurance sector.
Thank you, Ashutosh. I'll just take a couple of minutes, because such interesting discussion. I didn't interject in between. I had so much to talk about, but I think I love Amitabh's impatience. I've known him for close to 10 years now as an insurer and now a banker, very closely. But the point is, I think Piyush mentioned that, in trying to just zoom to the next stage without going through incremental excitement of creation, with the vision obviously where we have to be, we may actually drop the whole business model completely. A case in point here, I'll give just 2 examples of servicing. Automobile and health, there are 2 major lines of business for insurance companies. Now, automobile, ambition was that we want to pay claims within 10 minutes of the accident. And we did that very early on in 2014. Click pictures, upload. We had all the data, digital. We do OCR matching, you do machine learning, and offer to the customer on the spot. This is the claim amount. He says yes, pay the money to him. Great experience, wonderful. Health, next impossible. We're struggling. You can't get it on because every hospital has difference, and they don't have that kind of mindset that you have to move at this hyper speed. You depend on hospitals, you depend on the ecosystem to deliver that. And a lot of struggle. Then we decided, why don't we all insurance companies come together and create an exchange now? Then you transform the ecosystem, get hospitals on board, create an exchange, put insurance companies together, collaborate to create a system for reaching the stage where you can deliver to the customer an experience which he or she deserves and not be delivered today. So I think it's not so simple as an individual organization you can just transform and be ready tomorrow. You have to put the whole ecosystem in place, get people together and do so. Now coming to the nimble startups, I've been meeting all of them across the world. I love to be there. It excites me as a scientist because I'm a scientist by education. So one thing which I had in mind, and data point again, is that these startups would be able to deliver at a very low cost to the customer. And that's where legacy companies would die. That was in my mind, which was very, very strong because cost would be a huge issue. Then I thought, okay, with all this discussion happening, how is the cost moving? So I took data for 70 years for insurance industry to see, has the cost changed with all discussion happening? It was such a hilarious moment. It's the same cost. Can you believe it? And I'll leave it to Piyush and Sonali to have a look at it. All this talk of distillation, all this front end, ready to go. You look at the cost, and I do not have banking, I do not have banking data. I've looked at insurance data. 70 years, the cost structure when you had no distillation to today is still the same. It's ridiculous and it's shameful. Then I thought, okay, these nimble companies would be able to make a huge difference to the cost structure, and that's why to the end customer they would be giving something much better than we are doing, and that's a big threat. So let's watch it very, very carefully.
Okay,
hilarious. It actually went much higher than what we're thinking about. But the point is, in today's time, initial reaction when you had the startups and legacy companies come together, there was a clash, like Amitabh said, we eat you for lunch and all that stuff. Today's time, both realize it's not happening. And the era of collaboration has come between nimble companies and startups and insurtechs and insurance companies. And that model, I think, is propelling ahead at a much faster pace of making the changes. That's the point you said.
Okay. Amitabh, this would typically look like a family, how it would happen in a family. The grandfather would make sure that the younger, the teenagers are given the right set of culture. Is that happening enough for the industry? It's a very simple analogy, but is it happening enough?
Who is the grandfather here? Just to clear up.
The fact you're asking me, I assume I've given you the impression that we are the young person here. I hope that's the impression you have. The reality we'll talk about later. But one of the, if you look at what is happening, I don't want to make a macro comment, but the amount of capital which India is getting in the last, let's say, 12 to 18 months on broadly defined new age enterprises has shot through the roof. Someone mentioned valuations also, but let's just look at the capital alone. And it's partly coming because of what might be happening in some of the other markets. And so those avenues getting shut, and partly because of what India represents. But when this much of capital comes, and also obviously the fact that in the Western world, a lot of Indians are heading companies, a lot of Indians are becoming entrepreneurs, and so on and so forth. I think a combination of that means that we don't need to give them any advice. There are enough young people now in India who are willing to take the risk repeatedly to set up the new age enterprises of tomorrow. And they have tasted blood now with, and I mean tasted blood in the right way, because of what they're seeing in terms of listing, in terms of valuations, and how rapidly they're moving. So I think that trajectory has already taken off. So the worry which institutions like us have is, how do we find the talent to do some of the things that you're talking about? Because the young people now want to go and work for these entities whose valuation jumps twice every 3 months. And so in that sense, I think India is now at that stage where we don't even have to look back. It has already kind of bolted the stables to that extent, and it will continue to attract a lot of capital. And I'll just give an example. I was looking at and I keep quoting it quite repeatedly, I was looking at an ad which Oracle had on the back of Economist magazine, and they were talking about their SaaS, how a lot of new SaaS companies are actually using Oracle for their cloud services. And I just went through the list. Out of the 15 names there, 6 or 7 had Indian CEOs. They named the CEOs. I don't remember the names of the companies. What I remember is out of the 15 names there, 7 of them were Indian CEOs. I mean, you can make out from the names which are written there. That goes to tell you that, how many of these new companies globally and in India are being headed by Indians, being promoted by Indians across almost every part of the, let's call it the digital chain. And so, world is interesting, challenging, but it will, in India, things will change at a much more rapid pace than what we've been used to. And that is why I completely agree with Tapan when he says, and when he corrected me, I mean, when he said that incremental is important, of course, without incremental, you can't live. I mean, ultimately, you have to live in the present to be able to do something about the future. You can't just work on the future and forget the present. What I meant was that let's not forget the future also. So in that sense, looking forward to these times.
Okay. I think Amitabh raises a very important point, which is, see, the one other part about the startups is quite when we earlier said, then they come in to say, I am here to eat you for breakfast, is they believe their purpose is very clear. And that purposeful existence is very attractive. So it is also creating a massive war on talent for between us and the startups. And I'm putting us as a, we're taking, very attractive brand for, for a lot of technically, qualified people, but yet there is that. So how do we ensure that we are, the purpose of existence of us as an organization in the talent market is much more clear. And a tangential but related point, Tapan, if I look at the level of, feedback that I'm getting from my very large employee base, and the number of them that want to go and disrupt that hospital care at, systems, right? Your moment of finally getting the hospitals to integrate with you to give you something may be arriving, because won't be surprised if 3 or 4 of my people tomorrow leave, and they're so, because of their unfortunate experiences during the last 18 months, go and disrupt that world.
We will tell them to do so, because we already set up exchange. So we're on the track now. So if they don't go fast, we'll be ahead.
Okay. Amitabh, just wanted to ask, I understand you have a hard stop.
Yes,
so we'll thank you so much for joining, and I'm sorry if it extended.
Really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. Such a pleasure to meet all of you. Thanks.
Okay, we'll catch up with you later. Okay, so let me now just focus, because we don't have enough time. Let's also focus on the opportunities ahead. And Zarin, while we're talking of, in the initial remarks, Piyush mentioned about the opportunities. How does Stanchart see that? Because that spending and the pent-up demand that he spoke of, that is massive, and it's also already showing up a little bit.
So I think the opportunity is multifold. One is, I think, e-commerce, which is a $40-50 billion space. If you look at China, it's $2 trillion now. So clearly, of course, India is behind China by a decade, but that's the potential of that space. The second potential is on wealth. The wealth creation that is happening is quite rapid. And that's an exploding space. So for banks, really, it's about how do you sort of give the experience to your customers. And we've seen just simple wealth platforms kind of valuations that they are getting. So that to me is another opportunity. The third opportunity is how do you use data to do lending. And as banks, we are quite used to looking at CIBIL record and the pay slip and things like that. How are you going to use data in a way to do your credit decisioning? And that's directionally where all of us are moving. And that is the other big opportunity. How do you look at the e-commerce data, or if you're a banker to one of the e-commerce platforms, and how do you sort of work with them to give their customers buy now, pay later kind of offerings. So the space has enough and more for banks to keep doing, just reinventing their business model. And one thing that I think plays in favor of banks is the security of data. Today, as a customer, if you give your data to some site or some fintech or whatever, today banks are governed by a regulator, and the way the data or data integrity is preserved is very, very different than how it is handled in non-regulated entities. And to that extent, I think banks continue to have that trust and will continue to have a very, very to my mind, a lot of opportunities for banks to keep disrupting their business models and keep reinventing themselves and continue to service customers.
Okay, so that's one part of the view, but also let's get from Bandhan Bank, Shekhar, Ghosh, what does it look like in terms of the pent-up demand in the non-urban areas when you see the trends and speak to people?
No, India have the one big advantage, the population. And the 70% of the population living in rural, and where only the 11% of the bank branch are available to serve the 70% people. That means the huge opportunities to provide the banking services to the rural in future. And the rural people are not very much aware about the banking services. The big challenge of the country, how quick they can educate the people to access the formal banking services. This is one point. Opportunities more, and people are not ready. Second challenge is on that the people are graduated from MBA institute and join the bank. They are not ready to go to the rural to serve the people, because rural infrastructure, health and education are not that much level. So there is a challenge to provide to banking service to the rural areas. So hopefully digital can be work more on that. And second point on that, economically people are coming very good. Their income level increasing. In all respect, I saw that rural, semi-urban and urban metro, the same scenario we saw that in the last couple of years on that. And their demand also diversifying on that. How that demand will be served, that is a big market. Till now, we are not yet designing on that, how we can provide on that the diversified demand of this customer fulfill on this. So there is a huge market in rural and semi-urban, and banking services to be reach more people. There is a demand, there is opportunities. Diversify the product and their demand fulfill, that is also the opportunities. Challenge I already mentioned. Second point on that, my suggestion, if possible, I saw that in other country, there is a need on that the big institution only providing the financial literacy to the rural people. Who has the government can be like to set up on that and make it in such a way the people will be learned about that the formal financial services, how it can be accessed, how it can be utilized, and how it is can be like to transact with the bank on that. If you see that in the couple of the months, our regulator are marketing about the ATM transaction. If you misused, if you find out your transaction not happened, you can claim within that days, the bank will be like to provide the money return back to you. How the people now conscious about it on that. And the people are now coming to the bank to demand on this. So in that way, if some separate institution, only the objective to digitally aware about the financial services, make it on that, that can be the huge opportunities in India. And it cannot be like to meet in this number of the bank. It's a huge number of the more banking outlet can be open on that. So this is my see that I saw that in the opportunities.
Piyush, that also points to the policy part, and this would be my last question to you. The larger policy changes, Ms. Renu Karnad, she pointed about the account aggregators, cash flow-based lending that we are in the process of introducing. All that, how is that policy landscape going to aid all this and be the opportunity for banks?
Again, sadly, the disruption that is playing out in the institutions and the markets that you see here, that disruption and paradox is playing out for the regulator as well, right? How do you not come in the way of getting this new disruptive models to come in and prosper, but at the same time, how do you not let the customer down or the invested institutions down, right? Because at some point, I mean, whilst I'm, most of the times as institutions, we feel the regulators largely, making it more painful for us. I mean, they have to come and protect the invested institutions because, that's important as well, right? So that is a very difficult conundrum. But I do see some massive, even greater disruptions on the end. I mean, for example, if you look at today, sovereign digital currency, not cryptocurrency, sovereign digital currency is one of the disruptions that could put an entire new era of disruption into the financial system, right? So, and that is not, if you said to me this time last year, I would said, well, yeah, it's still far away. I'm not sure where it's going. But today it is not. It is, there are large pilots running in China, in Latin America, in Africa. The ECB has got a clear paper on, what they plan to do with it, right? And for me, it's again a conundrum, but the ability to code the usage of currency in a digital currency, especially for the rural sector, it can again introduce a level of disruption and efficiency in the system that is unprecedented, right? But then it can also bring into play new institutions that become lenders that never existed. Right. So then, Zarin has mentioned increasingly about, protection of consumer data. And that is a massive thing, because don't forget, the data is owned by the customer. We are all, just custodians and transient custodians of that data. Right? So I do think that's a very big challenge, and how that plays out is going to be a difficult one to predict, but also continue to grapple with. Who has monetization rights on that transient data? How do you ensure that you've got the right sharing of value and monetization play out in the economy in the future, right? Because that monetization opportunities are only going to go up. Right? So I think, look, as a regulator, they'll have to come in and with policy frameworks that, as it has the balance of, on one hand, not coming in the way of disruption, but on the other hand, protecting the customer, but as much as the invested institutions. Because if they don't do that, we'll end up in loss on both sides.
Okay, so this.
Can I ask you to Piyush to one thing? He can be like to give the answer or suggest it to us also. Banking industry using the lots of IT vendors. Is it not need now to make a one policy for the bank, for the regulator or government, how they can be provide the appropriate services to the customers? And I'm not sure about it, that today it is there or not. If the Piyush can be like to give some views on that.
Just to be clear, Mr. Ghosh, you're saying, is it time to bring out minimum service standards that everybody should? No, I'm more of a believer in market economics, so I wouldn't suggest that you would regulate that. I'm hoping, and in my view, the market economics will catch up and force everybody to come to a minimum standard. And I think, thankfully today, as you have said, right, we keep going back to you for a representation of rural and an unregulated employment market customer. His standard by which he is judging you and me is actually much higher than some of the urban. The urban have got greater tolerance because they have got a much wider bouquet of digital services that they access. that person is largely accessing super digital native organizations. So his standards by which he is expecting you to respond are much higher, and therefore, in my view, that is going to pull up and define the new minimum standards. I wouldn't go as far as to regulate it, because then it comes, in my view, that leads to lowest common denominator rather than highest possible standard.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so interesting discussion. Still, there's so much more left to discuss. So I will request Sonali to do the tougher job of summing up the entire conversation. Sonali, over yours.
Thank you. No, I think it's been a 90 minutes very well spent, and I think time just flew as we were discussing. I'll try, and I think the takeaways from me and from all the discussion that we did today was, I think one, consistently across all, we've seen consumer behavior shift quite rapidly at a very unprecedented pace, and also quite consistently, I would say, across different geographies and across different segments. So we heard Mr. Ghosh talk about some of the rural customers, or micro credit users as well, and how, or senior citizens, where it's slowly changing perhaps, and influencers are helping change that behavior as well. I think it has thrown up a lot of newer opportunities as well. So Zarin spoke about from a wealth perspective, how that's going to change the entire e-commerce space, which is booming, and how does that impact, or how is that going to throw up new opportunities for the financial services sector as well. So I think consumer demand, consumer behavior changing unprecedentedly. I think what we also spoke about and was interesting was, how do we work with our ecosystem partners, whether it's hospitals from a health insurance perspective, or it's working collaboratively very closely with the fintechs, and what we can learn from them around speed of decision making, speed of delivery. I think that's something which is going to keep us rapidly onto this journey. I think two other points which were I felt very important, which we discussed, and Amitabh spoke about that quite a bit earlier as well, around the two-speed approach, or the multi-speed approach that perhaps we all need to take onto this journey, because while the ongoing incremental stuff is something that everybody needs to do and you need to live in the present, but what are some of those changes which will have a longer lead time, or which will take over a period of time to actually fructify, but you need to start them now, and hence the multi-speed approach, because the magnitude of change and all the behavior changes, etc., that we spoke about, and for banks to adequately respond to that from a future perspective, the magnitude of change is enormous, and therefore having a two-speed approach or a multi-speed approach is something which which will ensure that we are able to actually pivot and move to that. And I think lastly, which again Zarin spoke about, and all of us I think on the panel spoke about, is the entire talent strategy. I mean, it's not enough, just moving or changing or responding to the consumer behavior changes, but how do we reskill our people? How do we make sure that they are being able to adapt to this new change, and also reskilling at the very senior management level or the leadership level, and both Zarin and Amitabh spoke about this in terms of ensuring technology quotient improving at that levels. For them to take the right decisions, to know what's happening. So I think the whole talent change, again, it's a journey which will take some time, but that's again a very critical, I would say, component, from an entire digital business model, moving to that perspective. So I think those were, I felt, some of the key points. Very interesting times, as someone said that it's great to be a banking CEO, and as well at this point of time.
Okay.
And Sonali, that was very well put. But one thing on a lighter note, I would have to say, while we all worried about digital disruption and all the disruptions, the smile on Renu's face on discovering the Uber generation has discovered that it needs to buy a house, and therefore no change there, I think was also a big takeaway for me.
Yeah.
Okay. So it just reminds me, as I thank everyone, just reminds me of Charles Dickens, A Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. So that's the point. So thank you everyone for being with us. And I'd like to thank everyone, Zarin Daruwala, Cluster CEO, India and South Asia Standard Chartered Bank, Amitabh Chaudhry just left us a few minutes earlier because we had some engagement. Managing Director and CEO, Axis Bank. Chandra, Ghosh, Managing Director and CEO, Bandhan Bank. Tapan, Singhel, Managing Director and CEO, Bajaj and Allianz General Insurance. Sonali Kulkarni, Managing Director and Client Group Lead with Financial Services at Accenture. And Piyush Singh, Senior Managing Director, Accenture in India. And of course, I shouldn't forget to thank that Ms. Renu Karnad. She also took out time to speak to us, so thanks to her as well. Thank you everyone for being with us for such a wonderful discussion. I just didn't realize as 90 minutes just flew by. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Ashutosh.